What is going on? This is Michael Hacker with the Hacker Outdoors podcast. Today I'm joined with Joey McCormack. We talk about his tournament debacle and debate a proposed ban on harvesting striped bass. If you like what you hear, please give us a rating on whatever platform you're listening to or watching us on. Please check the show notes for some links about topics we discussed today. And without further ado,
Anyway, that bass thing you sent me about the stripers, I think that's complete.
yeah, I think that bass thing is interesting and definitely a good point. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are live here. Thank you for joining us, Joe. Thank you for jumping on. Brian is busy this evening on a Tuesday night, man. What are you doing on a Tuesday night, Brian? I'm kidding. I know what you're doing, and I'm not going to call you out here, but that's all right. So, welcome, Joe. Appreciate it.
Anytime, brother.
So, we were supposed to do a notes from the field this past weekend, and that didn't happen. I don't know if you want to get into
Sure, I'd love to.
why it didn't happen. Let's start with that. How's that sound?
Yeah. So, this is not the MLFFL WBFLs. This was another uh tournament series. Um, so we all showed up there. I think they probably had about 100 boats. Everybody's there, putting the boats in the water. This is Saturday. About 5:50. We were all supposed to be in the water by 6, and a text message
Let's
goes
hold
out.
on. Let's just clarify that. We're talking AM here, not PM.
AM, correct.
Yes. And so
I was actually.
you drove from your home to this location, meaning you were up. I just want to set the stage here for a moment. What time did you wake up? Or, we know you don't really sleep well before tournament days.
Well, it depends. I don't sleep well if I have to. If it's this one was on the Potomac, so I leave like at 3 a.m. from my house to get down there. It's about 89 miles. It takes about an hour. So I left at 3:10. I was there like at 4:40. Um, and that's when the gates open to the park. And of course, everybody's putting their boats in. Everybody's getting ready to go. And about 5:55 in the a.m., text message comes out that uh, the tournament's on hold because of wind. At that point, I think the wind was about 8 knots, maybe topping out at 10. In my eyes, there was no reason for us to be on hold, but they determined they were going to put it on hold. So they proceeded to say, we're going to hold to 9 o'clock and then reassess from there. So, of course, we all get on our weather apps and we're looking, and it showed the winds at 6 a.m. till 9 o'clock, would be 8 knots, 10 knots, which is really nothing where we were at. And then, at 9 o'clock, they were going to start dying down and finally level out to around 4 knots, 2 knots, sunny, nice. And so we all waited at 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock, the message came that the tournament is canceled, which in my eyes was not proper call. And, there's several other people I spoke to who felt the same way. Just look at Lake Murray. Look what we fished in the Lake Murray.
It's,
Where
I,
I don't have words for it because compared to those conditions and other conditions I went out to, it was just like I couldn't make sense of it in my mind.
and we spoke. I mean, you called me. Well, I should say you text me. I'm an early riser, so we were texting at like 6 in the morning. I think I called you at like 7,
Yep.
and you told me that it was on hold, and you called me again to tell me when it was canceled. And I said to you, I said, Joe, if you were to look at the trees there, because there's a little trick you showed me, the tips of the trees, are they swaying? And you're like, no. And I said, okay, because I think the night before, to be completely honest, it was chaotic.
Yes.
I'll give them that. Like, there's stuff that was blown all over the place, and we had some ferocious windstorms going on up here, and I know that it was up and down the eastern seaboard. Now, at 6 a.m., like I said, I got up, I was brewing my coffee. I kind of gave one of these out the window, and I said, oh, it's going to be a beautiful day today.
Well,
And
that's the best part of this story because, like I said, 8 to 10 knots to me is not a big deal. And there was quite a bunch of us who decided to go out anyway and fish. And me and my buddy Joe Dixon, he's an older guy, and Melvin. Melvin has his own boat. I went with Joe. We literally left the docket. I mean, they called it at 9, and we were going out at 9:20, 9:18, 9:15. And where you launch at the Potomac, you launch on Man and Woman Creek, and you literally make a left, and there's the main body of the Potomac. And we did that, and the wind was still at that point like at 8 knots, and it there was no reason we should have been out there. We ran to our first spot, and Joe looked at me and said, "Yeah, that this is ridiculous." And by the time we left that first spot, maybe 40 minutes later, and went to the second spot, the wind was pretty much done. It was glass like I've never seen on the Potomac. I mean, just like, and we just had a absolutely gorgeous day of fishing it, and we absolutely hammered them. Um, the guy Joe, whose boat I was in, if you know, in my opinion, he probably would have won the tournament with what he weighed, just him and I fishing together.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't experienced the bite like that in the Potomac that was that good for a little while. For a while, I mean, we caught a good bit of fish and good size. So
Well, let's make lemonade out of these lemons for what it was worth, right? So you wound up having a hell of a day on the water, right? Um, you fished better part of 8 hours, give or take, I
9.
think.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
we stayed out long. Yeah, it was probably about
yeah.
4 when we got off. Yeah,
Because
it
you
was
called
that
me
good.
when
It
you
was
got back in the car,
that
and when you say it was that good, take me through it for a moment here. How
So
good are we talking? Like, what do what constitutes as a good day? I think a day on the water constitutes as a good day. Um, you know, but you're talking, you caught a serious number of fish, if I'm not mistaken.
we did, and Joe caught one that I think was 5 and some ounces. He thinks high fours. That fish was a 5 pounder, and then right after that, he caught a solid 4 plus, and then filled the limit out with threes, and then was still catching fish. And then during that same time, I was still just just catch them. The bite was just it would come in flurries and come in often flurries. So we would have like 10 minutes where it'd just be like fish, 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 fish. Then we might have 10 minutes where the clouds came a little bit because it was sunny, but it was the clouds would come over itself and the bite would turn off. 5 minutes later, the clouds would go away, the bite would turn on. And that went on probably from like 11 till probably about 3 o'clock, just fish, 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 fish. Because the fish up here were in the same spot they were at when I was down at Murray. Once again, all their top lips were just looked like they had lipstick on, bright red, just from feeding up to get ready to spawn. And every fish, like even the shorts we caught that were under 15 inches, like the 13 inches, were 2 pound fish. I mean, they were fat, just like we call
Hmm.
them belly shirts, little fat fish.
Yeah, I
And
love the way when they look like that.
and then Melvin, he hooked up with a 7 pounder across from us. Um, like you said, at least we were out there, and any day on the water was a good day, But now
So
apparently the
what were
rumor
you
is the
throwing?
tournaments. Oh, what I was throwing? Well, um, we were catching them crankbaits, and we were also catching them in finesse. Um, they were really, when they would turn on, they were. I would think anything you would throw it in front of them, they would eat, but they were really eating the crankbait, and they were really eating the finesse presentation. Um, red colors, red's pretty popular this time of year.
Yeah.
Um, but I was even getting bit on like shad colors too. Um, I think at that point, when the fish are getting ready to spawn, I think they're just eating. If you can get something, especially when the bites like that, you know, I was throwing a finesse presentation, and when that bite would turn on, as soon as my worm would hit the water, they would eat it. Like it was just right place, right time. I mean, I had a great time.
The universe aligned, man. Now imagine for a moment if the tournament was going on and this was happening. I mean,
That's the tough part to swallow because I talked to
yeah.
another guy I'm pretty close to. Funny enough, his name's Joe too. Um, he was out there and he said he slammed them, absolutely slammed them. I did talk to a couple of guys. You didn't know the river, don't know the river too well who were out there, and they called some. They didn't do as well as we did, but guys who had a knowledge of the river and where to go. I mean, they they were catching them, and I honestly feel like um, the guy went out with Joe. I, if that was his bag he brought to the scales at weigh-in and the tournament went on, I really feel like he would have had a really good shot to win it. And my bag would have had a pretty good shot too to win it. It's just who's to
What
say
do
if
you,
we had the tournament that would have happened. But I'll tell you this: we missed the morning bite, the first thing in the morning, and I think that bite window probably would have been better than what we experienced.
oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And you were saying, if I'm not mistaken, that the morning tide when you guys were supposed to launch was, I mean, that would have been the prime time for fishing,
We would
right?
have had a
That,
great tide because we would have had dropping tide, I think from like, I forget what the window was, but it hit dead low like at 1 o'clock. And usually, a lot of people out there will say, oh, after low tide, they're really hard to catch. But we were still, I mean, catching a lot of fish. I mean, our big flurries came after the tide was almost a dead low to that point where they really shouldn't be eating like that. I mean, it was just,
yeah. Uh, I'm happy for you, man. I think, even though even though it was incredibly frustrating, and even though the tournament, it sounds like, made some terrible decisions here, I mean, you were out fishing. I mean, I went out fishing, and the bite just wasn't happening, man. There was no life on the river whatsoever. Um, so I applaud you. You got the
is it,
stank of the situation off you.
it's a tough pill to swallow for guys because the guys who take tournament fishing seriously, there's a lot of work that goes into this, a lot of prep leading up to the tournament. And then now it seems they've rescheduled it for back-to-back days in July on the Potomac, which that's not really the ideal time to be out there fishing and having a tournament.
Hmm.
And you have guys. I know a guy who came from Pennsylvania, spent 4 days practicing down there, had a place. You know, I can't repeat what he said to me about the event being canceled because we are a family show, and
Yeah,
this man
PC.
is a pretty well known. He was on the tour for a while, and I kind of feel like him because I can almost say within 100% certainty if it was FLW, MLF, FLW, BFLs, no way in hell
Well,
it
I,
would
I
even cross their mind.
I remember you telling the story, and excuse me, you were telling the story about fishing on the St. Lawrence, right?
Mhm.
And there were many boats, and believe me by saying, I'll preface this by saying that I don't believe you guys should have been out there on that day. Um, but you know, damage to boats, and people, potentially getting injured, and you're talking massive waves coming off the Great Lakes there into the St. Lawrence, and that's, you guys still fish that. And I think there's an overabundance of security in some sense that needs to be taken into consideration if there's, some sort of weather event, we'll say air quote weather event. Um, but I mean, there's no reason why you guys shouldn't have gone out there.
No, the St. Lawrence was definitely on that edge of, maybe, they closed the lake off, so nobody was allowed on the lake. And once you got up in the river, like away from the lake, there was just real strong current. But when you got near the lake, it was when you're going back to weigh in across from the lake, that's where those huge, huge waves were. That day, different story. This day, the kicker was, I feel like the director at some point, should have got in the boat and made the minute ride, not even to look what the river looked like before he made his call. And that didn't happen. I mean,
Yeah. Well, well, we won't dwell on it because we'll
I
move
know
on from here. But I
that's a
think,
whole other discussion for a whole other day. And
yeah,
I
it's
don't
good.
like putting people on blast. And
No, no, we're not trying to
yeah,
do
I'm
that
not,
here. There might be a good reason as to why the director did that, but from an outsider looking in, someone who wasn't there, I mean, it sounded like it was foolish. I mean, I went on and I looked on my
beautiful.
machine here, and I went and checked out the weather, and I was looking at radar over you guys, and everything looked fine. I mean, if I was in charge of it, I probably would have let it go. But then again,
Like I said, by 10:30, it was beautiful. Like just glassed up, like no wind, sun's out. Like it's like
Yeah.
But like you said, at least Joe's name's Joe Dixon. He was great enough to let me go out with him, and we had a great day on the water. If that didn't happen, I would still be bitter to just not a happy guy.
I mean, you were still bitter when we talked at like 6 o'clock that night. So and I get it, but I'm glad you guys wound up having a good day. That's hey,
I got a big one coming up, not this Saturday, the following Saturday. So
coming up, man, coming up. Wait, is that Easter
27th,
weekend? No, we have 3 weeks until Easter.
is that right? Yeah.
27th.
The weekend before. That's
That's
going to be
awesome.
a smash fest.
Well, I saw Brennan was fishing down there, wasn't he?
Hmm.
I saw that
He
he
was,
posted.
and he said, they're not up on beds yet. It was weird. Some of the pictures he sent me, the fish were real white still, looking like they were coming in from colder water. And it seems like to be setting up that weekend is going to be the weekend that you want to be down there fishing those lakes.
I am ecstatic for you. I have a feeling it's going to be
Let me
a
give you my
great tournament.
estimations for a boater. For a boater to win, I would say a boater would have to have at least 20. I think 27 pounds is going to win it. 27 pounds, 5 fish, 27. I wouldn't be
Someone write that down,
surprised.
ladies and gentlemen.
I wouldn't
27
be
pounds.
surprised if somebody weighs a 30-pound bag. And I think co-anglers are going to have to crack 20. Yeah.
I
They're
mean,
monsters down there.
and
Absolute
if they're getting close to
monsters.
being on bed, I mean, they're even bigger.
If
So
they're going to be some on bed, yeah.
yeah,
There's going to be quite a
that's
few.
wow, that's something, man. Yeah. So
I think the top five boaters are going to be like 25-pound range. I think the winner's going to be anywhere. I think 27, but I wouldn't be surprised to see 30 pounds. Not one bit.
that's predictions from Joe, ladies and gentlemen. You heard it here. I'm excited to see how this turns out. I'm hoping you get some, video and photos of things that are going
Well,
on that. Um,
you
we'll,
will. Brennan's got a brand new GoPro,
I
brand
know,
new.
I know,
So,
I know. Well, I'm a computer guy. I can fix that for him. So
well, he you know what he said? He just ended up buying the brand new one. He was like, screw that. He bought the new one.
I don't
He went
blame him.
out today and he's like, I went through my batteries. You know,
Oh, they
got over
burn so
40,
quickly.
40 fish he caught on a frog on film today.
Well, I can't wait to see those up on the Instagrams.
He's working on a project with the biologist from MLF on a private pond. When we say pond, I mean I think it's like 47 acres. It's huge.
That's a lake.
What yeah, most people, yeah, I think it's actually bigger than your lake
My
in your
town lake.
town.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you were to see it, like that's a lake, but they're calling it a pond. So
Why? I think this brings up a good segue into one of the other topics. I had sent you a Field and Stream article. I'll link to it in the show notes here. But Stripers Forever is calling for a 10-year ban on harvesting striped bass. There's a new proposed regulation that could stop commercial and recreational harvests of striped bass for a decade from Maine to North Carolina. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, migratory species of fish, they're regulated not just on a state-by-state level, they're regulated kind of in the entire stretch that they're migrating. So for the striped bass, they're migrating from Maine back down the East Coast here to North Carolina. So they're being regulated that entire span of the East Coast. I believe they do the same thing on the West Coast. I think they do from Washington to
I
California.
think so. Yeah.
But long story short, and I think we've hit on this a few times over the past couple episodes. Going back, I think even to the early. So the organization's called ASMFC. They're looking to enact this 10-year harvest moratorium, but would still allow for catch and release fishing. Additional measures would include barring the targeting of striped bass in historic spawning areas, limiting lures to a single treble hook, and requiring barbless hooks on lures. I think before we get into the conversation there, I think that the data is interesting, and this kind of goes into what you were just saying about Brennan and working with biologists. So they estimate from 2019, the latest year for which the data is available, they indicate that recreational anglers caught 30.9 million fish, 28.8 million of which were released. Of those sent back to the water, 2.59 million died from the stress of the encounter. But with the moratorium, Stripers Forever is looking to preserve approximately the 2.2 million fish that were taken for the table by recreational anglers and another 619,000 by commercial fishermen to strengthen the striper stocks along the East Coast. So they are taking comments until April 9th regarding your feelings on this, as you know, Mr., Mrs., and other taxpayer. But I thought it was interesting, and you and I had talked about this a number of times offline and on here, just kind of how the hell do you know that? Like, this is kind of like I think they're using the law of numbers, right,
Numbers.
and averages and trying to figure that out. But um, I mean, so I started poking around a little bit, and I did see that there are a bunch of articles here going back even to a couple weeks ago. It says volunteers wanted by the DEC to count striped bass fish harvest. So working, this is state of New York, working with the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commissions. That's that ASMFC. So they're trying to figure out exactly what they have and how many fish are being caught, right? It says if you fish for striped bass north of the George Washington Bridge and tidal Hudson River, you should be emailing with any that you have caught. I thought that was kind of interesting. Then, of course, anything that you harvest, they definitely do require you to record that.
Really? I didn't know
But
that.
counting is, um, I mean, we talked about this with a lot of the species, the other species, right? Like the brown trout for some of the fisheries that I go to. It's like they're walking through, they electrocute the little strip of the river here, and they just pick them up and sex them and make sure that they're still alive and count them that way. Um, how you do that in a migratory system is beyond me. Um, I mean, I'm not a biologist, but it just sounds like it's a lot of numbers games and figuring, okay, well, if people are catching this many, that means that there's got to be some sort of multiplying effect that's associated with it. I'd love to find out more. In my hour today or so since I found the article, I haven't been able to find anything, any scientific papers on it. But
I can
uh,
tell you this:
yeah,
in the Bay for the past several years, and increasing every year, I just feel how great it is and how great the fishing been, and how there's so many more stripers, and people are catching them now in the inner harbor like pretty regularly, which I can tell you 18 years ago wasn't something that happened pretty
Inner
regularly.
Harbor, for those of you who are unaware, that is in downtown Baltimore. I mean, that's impressive.
So the word
Um,
around here is that the population is growing. So, and when I used to fish them a lot with Joe, I think we were allowed to keep one over a certain size or two under a certain size. So it wasn't like when you would go out fishing recreational that recreational fishermen could not keep tons of these. It's not something that could be you can go out there and take 5, 6, 10 home. I mean, it was like two or one.
but I have strong feelings on this, right? And I think if biologists, and I'd like to trust the science here, right, and say like, okay, well maybe we're seeing a boom in certain areas, right? And we're not seeing it elsewhere. Maybe there's disruptions to their migratory paths, right? There's so many other things that could be happening that maybe they're not making it as far north as they used to. Maybe they're not making as far south. Maybe they're not leaving the tidal waters. Maybe they're not growing to the size that they are. I don't know. But if scientists and biologists who are scientists are believing that there's some sort of pressure that's being put on them that's causing these numbers to dwindle, because remember striped bass were almost, well, endangered, what, going back 20, 30 years, right? So we don't want to get to that point again. So is it so bad to put a moratorium on the actual harvesting and just say, listen, let's put a moratorium. Maybe it's not 10 years, maybe it's 5 years. Let's revisit it after 2 years, something like that. Let's figure this out. Let's see what's happening to them. Let's see if we're able to bounce this back and see if the harvesting was part of the problem, just like you would do with the hunting of any kind of animal, right? And figure it out and then adjust accordingly. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I mean, I'm a catch and release fisherman for the most part, but if you want to keep a fish, I have no problem as long as that's not a pressured fish or an endangered fish, right? And we want to definitely not. I think most anglers, just like most hunters, truly revere the species that we love and we recreate for, right? So I don't want anything to happen to these striped bass. I want them to be around for many generations to come, for recreational purposes and also for harvest. So if that means that we have to kind of bring that back a little bit, right? And say, okay, well, something else is happening here. Let's take this little moratorium and
That's
not
the thing.
keep.
I
I don't
think
have a
they need to
problem with
look at. I need to think. I think they need to look in other reasons. Maybe there's less up by you. I don't think. I don't know. Like I said, it's been you've only been allowed to keep such small, minuscule amounts. That maybe something else is going on, like you said. Maybe
it. Yeah,
I mean, because like I said, I haven't fished for them right lately, but people I follow on Instagram who run charters or have just been saying that it's just they're everywhere.
yeah,
They're just everywhere. And I did notice they were catching them later into the season down here than what they usually. I mean, everywhere. So
yeah. No,
I think
it's a
there's
good
maybe
point.
more into it than just they're being overfished.
Well, I think you have once again we talk about the law of numbers, right? So you have the population is of humans is expanding rapidly, right? Up and down the eastern seaboard. So you have more and more people living there. People are taking up angling left and right. I see it here, like on the local rivers. I see it down the shore. I mean, when we were down there fishing, what last weekend? uh, I mean, really this time of year, maybe see one other guy out there fishing on the stretch that I'm on. I mean, there were like 10 guys out. And I mean, that's not a ton, but you take that over the entire, every beach in the state of New Jersey and then every beach in the state from Maine to North Carolina. I mean, that adds up. And if everyone's keeping fish, which we don't know, right? Um, I don't have those numbers. That could be problematic, right? So, you know, yeah, on the surface, you're like, okay, well, each angler can keep one fish, but is that, that's one fish a day. So technically, if you're skilled, we'll say, and you're in the right place at the right time, let's say you harvested 7 striped bass in a single week, and everybody who was harvesting was doing the same thing. I mean, that adds up really quickly. So I don't have a problem with the moratorium. But then again, I don't have enough information on it. I think that there's always more than meets the
Was
eye.
it
And
10 years? I think that's
10 years.
overkill.
Yeah, agreed.
Because you'll see
Agreed.
it here in our bay with crabs, like other crab populations, so slammed. And then 2 years later, it's like, oh, it's a huge crab population. Then sometimes I think things fluctuate, not always because of human interaction. I think there's some things that we just don't have control over that sometimes can cause certain things.
No, I can agree to that.
I,
There's more to
but then
the
again, we
universe
don't
than we know.
have. I can tell you this in the bay, we don't have. I don't think the stripers are near as pressured as what it sounds like, and from what I see up on the around the Jersey coast, like I've seen like those pictures of all those boats by the shore chase. And like we don't.
Yeah, yeah.
I, I've never seen it like that. Who knows? Who
Well,
knows?
I think, and I'm not familiar with Maryland. I had a
It's
fishing license with you guys once, but I don't recall. Do you need a saltwater's license?
hmm,
Okay, so
there's saltwater title and blah blah
and you pay for that, right?
blah. Mhm.
So that probably keeps it down a lot. Like whereas here in New Jersey, you don't need a saltwater license. You have a freshwater license, and then you need a saltwater registration, which is free. And you can register for the, I don't know if they're doing it this year, but there's a striper bonus program. And it, once again, I don't think it costs anything. Like I have to pay for my trout stamp once again to
Yeah,
fish for trout. But
we pay. Yeah.
but like in Florida, for example, I know when I go to Florida, I buy a all around fishing license, which
Mhm.
allows me to fish the tidal water, the ocean, and that it's expensive as an out of state person. It was like I think like $60 for me to get that. Um, but maybe that's part of the problem too. And I've sent you photos of kind of the striped bass runs and watching these striped bass go crazy out there. And guess what? There's hundreds of boats out there. Like you said, they're chasing them.
I
They're chasing them
when
up and
I
down the
saw that
coast.
stuff, I've never seen anything near that extent. Nowhere close. I mean, when we go down to Kapikta Peak, where the bay meets the ocean, where they would come in, around November, December, there'd be boats out there, but nothing even close to like that. Nothing even close. Like not even like this close to it. Like that. Seeing those videos, it's crazy to me. Like, and some of those charters you send me videos to, there's like 30, 40 people.
Well, yeah, in the COVID world, I think it's like half, if not a quarter of that. But it in the non-COVID world, they're literally packed to the gills with people, and pun intended, I guess.
Yeah.
But you got to think like, I don't know.
See, Jersey's unique. So the way Jersey, it seems like from anywhere in Jersey, you can get to the shore so quickly. Like,
Yeah,
and you're there.
and then you have Pennsylvanians coming here because
It's quick from there too.
it's
If
pretty quick from
honestly,
here.
for me to go to your sister's house, it takes less time for me to go to for me to drive to her house rather than drive to Ocean City, Maryland. It takes me longer to get to Ocean City, Maryland than it does for me to drive to that part of New Jersey,
Yeah, see,
which
that's
is
insane to
insane.
me. Yeah,
And to me, most of the Jersey beaches are far more beautiful than, Ocean City's an awesome place. It's just it doesn't compare in my mind. You know,
yeah.
and also your state's so heavily populated. I mean,
Well, that's what I'm saying is
yeah,
you have so many pleasure boaters and so many recreational fishermen that like I mean it's gonna happen, right? Like it's gonna happen. But this is when you start to get up to Maine, like you have less and less fishermen. When you get up to Rhode Island, like all of New England, like it's not as I think overly pressured like it is here.
like I said,
Um,
I would bet you one of your beach towns because in New Jersey, the beach in Maryland is Ocean City. It's just, it's the whole stretch. But Jersey's, you got San Diego, you got all these different beaches, all these different beach towns. I would bet you like one of your beach towns probably has more charters than runs out of Ocean City, and I think that's like a 30-mile stretch, 40-mile
yeah.
stretch.
And what's
One of your
crazy is not a day goes by, and that I belong to all these forums and stuff like that, that you don't see some sort of like post from someone saying, "Hey guys, I just bought a boat. I'm doing charters now." Like the three so far this weekend. It's Tuesday night that I saw like, "Hey guys, I just bought a center console. I'm doing charters. I'm ready to do striper, in 3 weeks, for example." And there are guys, typically from what I'm reading on the charters, like my buddy had messaged me, said that he's ready to start doing a charter maybe sometime in April. But guys are starting to run them now. And I
all
think
these guys are getting their captain's licenses and everything, and I mean,
it's crazy.
maybe it's different up there, but I thought the run charters you have to have a cap. I mean, good on them, I guess, for going through all that. I mean, that's
I mean, it's a good thing. Like
yeah.
it's kind of like guiding, right? Like I think guiding is kind of a cool thing. Like more and more people are getting into guiding for, going out to do other types of fishing, like for example, trout fishing. That's great. Like I applaud it, but there comes like a moment of critical mass where you say there's almost too many of them. And I don't think everyone's going to survive in that. It's a very tough industry to survive in. I would never want to be a guide. I would never want to own a boat and run it. I mean, I want a boat for me, and I would take people out that I'm friends with, but like I don't want to do that for a living. I think it's a very rough life, and I think people have this fantasy that it's kind of the dream job, those of us that are anglers, and it's not. I mean,
I
you're
can
not
tell you
fishing.
this: being a charter for like offshore fishing is a ton of work. People don't realize it. The work that goes in to take people out. This is offshore to fish offshore. It is a ton of work. My buddy Captain Todd down in Myrtle Beach will tell you because he does offshore and he also does bass. That offshore, it's more than a full day of work because night before they're prepping all their rods, get everything ready. I mean, it's a
Yep.
ton of work.
Well, and I
And
get
if you
that.
don't, you have to have a good crew with you too, because the captain can't be leaving the, you know,
Right.
steering the boat to go fart
Right.
around with people who are tangled.
Right.
Like that's a
Right.
bad idea, especially if you're trolling, because as soon as the boat goes, your lines go.
Right. Right.
It's a lot, and I think
And
that
and
might be the better answer is limiting the amount of striper charters because those video, I forgot all about those videos you said. It was insane to
I
see, and
I
like just
couldn't.
off the beach, just like chasing, just like boat.
Well, and you see them, and from Sandy Hook, you can see across into Brooklyn. You can see,
Yeah,
you can see downtown Manhattan. So, like, picture Battery Park there, right? You can see, like, from the tip there, you can see Jersey City, the Raritan Bay, and then, do you just like when the Striper Run was happening in the fall? It was the first time that I had ever witnessed something so chaotic in my entire life. Like I've witnessed runs where you see the birds diving, and this was something that was so massive. It was from as far left as I could see to as far right as I could see. So they were running from left, which is north, south towards, obviously the south. And the birds, like thousands of seabirds diving into the water, and within minutes of this occurring, now it didn't just, uh, it didn't happen to the left and then start working your way to the right. Like they all just came to the surface pretty much in front of me, and the blitz happened like that. They just started feeding on the surface, and this is when the birds and everything happened. And as soon as the birds started hitting the water, you started seeing all these boats coming from Brooklyn, from all the way in, like, basically to the mouth of the Raritan Bay by the, lower Manhattan, and then all up and down the coast just started converging down onto this one spot. And they're throwing, and you could see them from the beach. You could see people on these charters tossing everything that they have out there. Like literally within the seconds, hundreds of people fishing the same blitz because it was that massive. And you say, that's a little chaotic. I don't, maybe you're right. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe
because
limiting.
I have never personally seen anything down here like that. Never. Then
Yeah.
again, we don't have, you know, the population and the amount of I mean, the coastline. Like you said, New York's right there,
Right.
right there. I mean, it's a ton of people, and they want to go get in on that. And
Right.
like you said, those boats, they're on the radio. Birds are
Right.
diving here.
Right. Right.
And like you said, if you have three boats, you could have easily have 300 people all thrown at that pod. And I mean, that I didn't think of it like that. Yeah, I think maybe something like that might. I think that would help because that would be decimating. Yes, that
Yeah.
would be absolutely decimating.
Especially if they're all keeping, right? Like that's if they're all
Oh,
keeping the fish, which I'm sure a lot of them are,
mm-hmm.
um, that's problematic. But I think you and I are on the same path here. And talking to Brian, we are all on the same path that we think that something has to be done. Obviously, if there's some sort of adverse effect happening to a population of
See, I
animals that we
just
love, but something
maybe
doesn't
with
add up.
right. Well, like with COVID, maybe you could say something goes out there 7 days a week. I doubt there's very few people who get to go out striper fishing. It's such a small window.
Right.
Out of
Right.
that season, the normal person surfing fishing from the beach is so minuscule. How much? Maybe they go out 2 times, 3 times.
Right. Like me with all my abundance of free time, I made it out three
I mean,
times.
3 times.
I and only two of them I actually caught fish because I missed the blitz, like by
And how
in the
many did you
tide.
keep? How many were keeper size?
None.
I don't think
Well, one of them was.
one was. Yeah,
One was, and the rest were schoolies. But guess what? Like to me, I don't care because it was still fun.
still fun to catch them. Just in my mind, is after seeing those videos, to me, that's where I remember thinking that because I'm never. They're so close to the shore too. Like I remember thinking like that's not really that safe. I what do I know? But then I remember thinking like these guys are just decimating the school. Like it's insane.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place for us to leave it. I think you know, you do what you can to support the animals that we love and we recreate with and for, right? So if the same thing was happening to, our smallmouth and largemouth bass and the fisheries that we love, like, it's our responsibility as um, people in the industry to, speak up for them because they can't speak for themselves, right? Kind of preachy moment there, but um, if something's really happening, maybe that is the best thing to do. But without all the facts, it's very, I think 10 years is a little excessive. I could see maybe doing a 2 to 5 year. Um, but then again, maybe there's some other steps that you can do. I think just throwing the brakes on everything is not the right
I
way.
would bet money that your state and maybe New York are going to start limiting the number of charter licenses they give out. Because like I
I
said,
wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, New Jersey is typically very harsh on sportsmen in general. I'll say
I
that kind of
I remember you and I talking about going to the charter and just like looking. I forget what area we looked in. We decided on
Atlantic
one,
Highlands. I think it was.
and I just
Was it that?
I
Yeah,
f- I just Googled that area in charters, and like 10 popped up in that
yeah.
area. I remember thinking like, holy
And there was
crap,
one marina.
that is a lot. Like,
Yeah.
traveling up and down the East Coast, I can tell you that is a lot of charters in just one area.
Yeah.
On a side
Well,
note, did you know that Dingo Ate My Baby was a real story?
it did actually.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, Dingo ate my baby.
They put that lady through hell and her husband, and actually in jail for 3 years to come to find out that the dingo really did eat her baby.
See, that I didn't know, but I knew the story was real.
Yeah,
I
I
didn't
read
know
something
that
about that.
Yeah, it's one of
Another
those
story for another day.
strange but true stories. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining. And Joe, have a good night.
Later, brother.